Primarily, I am a short story writer, and what I'm going to read to you today is a short story that I wrote a couple of years ago for an anthology. It was for a tornado relief anthology a couple of years back. So the story doesn't really appear anywhere else except for in my little collection and in this one anthology. So I like to read it because most of the time nobody's heard it before or seen it before. And it's kind of funny. So I'm primarily known for being a short story writer, and I edit short stories and things like that. I have a little magazine where we do incredibly short fiction, under 2,500 words, poetry, that kind of thing. But I haven't been publishing a lot lately because I'm actually writing a novel. There's a point at which I started out being someone who wanted to write novels, and I wrote about 7 of them and kept trunking them because they were terrible. You know, it's a learning curve. And then I started getting into short stories and reading all this work and found that, oh, I love short stories, and I love flash fiction and tiny little pieces of poetry and these really like what you can do in this intricate little turn of like under a couple thousand words. And the last several years, that's what I've been doing. I've been writing short stories and publishing that, and I love the form. And then recently, I had an idea for a novel that, for the first time, I actually knew what it was. I plotted it all out. I knew everything I wanted to say, and I wasn't gonna write 50,000 words and realize I had already gotten to the end, or that it sucked. So, well, hopefully I will get through it and it won't suck. So lately I haven't been doing as much short story work, but it's still something that I love, and I will always keep going back to. You know, I write a couple chapters of the novel, and then I write another story. It's something I can't get away from. So I think at this point that's probably everybody, and if anyone shows up, they'll catch the middle of the story. Okay. Kind of real quick. So this story is called Annabel Tree. The tree grew up around her as she sat at its base, day after day. It had been a sapling when her parents bought the house by the creek, and it made a perfect backrest for Annabel the child. She sat very still, her chubby 3-year-old hands clasped together, arms tied around her knees, as her father sat alone on the creek bank. He waited for a fish to appear on his line, and she waited with him. "I don't want you sitting out all day on the ground," her mama had said after the second day faded into evening, and Annabel once again walked into the kitchen with a dirty bottom. "Yes, Mama," she replied quietly as her mama brushed her off with a hand broom and quick, hard strokes. Her mama sighed. "There's no use. That dress is ruined." Annabel was given a hot bath, a cold supper, and sent to bed without a story. She wrapped her arms around Mr. Bunny and listened to her parents' raised voices float up to the floorboards until she fell asleep. The next day, Daddy couldn't fish because he had to work on the house, as it was in no fit state for people to say, Annabel's mama had said. And there were church people that wanted to come over for a housewarming. Annabel liked the church people, who'd come over to their old apartment with ambrosia salad and fried chicken, and Mrs. Cramble, who wore flower print dresses and had thick, soft arms, would give her great big hugs and extra helpings on her plate, and Mama never complained. Annabel followed her daddy around all afternoon, holding the tin bucket with his hammer and nails in it, and when he needed one or the other, she'd lift it up as high as she could, and he'd reach down into the bucket and take what he needed. Sometimes he'd smile at her, too. As the day got longer, Daddy got to swearing at the way the hammer struck his thumb, or the number of shingles that needed to be nailed back into place, and how slow Annabel's arms were in getting the heavy bucket up to his waiting hand. So he banished his daughter from further helping. Going back into the house before dark would mean playing alone in her bedroom, and that'd be enough time for that after dinner. So Annabel meandered through her backyard, getting to know it. There was a pile of rocks near the driveway, all bigger than her hand and rounded. They were gray, and sometimes gray with white shot through them. She took the smallest one she could find and put it in her pocket. There was a stump on the hilly part of the yard, where it rose up before sloping back down to the creek again. She stood on the stump for a while, looking out over the whole of the yard and the creek and the tops of the trees which marked the woods beyond. "Annabel!" her mama yelled. Annabel turned and saw her mama's head peeking out from behind the open second-story window. "Get down from there before you fall and break your neck." The little girl quickly scrambled down, scraping her knee in her hurry, and turned back to look at the house. A bit of white lace curtain fluttered out through the still-open window, but Mama had already gone back inside. Dinner was fried eggs, a piece of bread with a pat of butter on it, and an earful from Mama about how girls don't play outside in the dirt. Daddy tucked her into bed after her bath, read 2 pages of The Little Engine That Could, but didn't finish it. He did kiss her forehead before turning out the light, though. When she was 5, Annabel took that book with her to her first day of kindergarten and asked the teacher to read it to her. After alphabet time and learning to cut straight lines with rounded scissors, Mrs. Kenny read the whole book from start to finish for all the children. Mrs. Kenny looked beautiful when she read, her back straight and tall, and a sweet smile on her face. For 2 months, Annabel brought the book back to school with her every day and wished that Mrs. Kenny were her mama too. Finally, her teacher sighed and handed the book back without opening it. "I'm happy to read another book if you want to bring it in, sweetheart, but we've read this one enough." She smiled a little, and Annabel put the little engine back into her school bag, which had been a gift from Mrs. Cramble and the church people. For the rest of the year, Mrs. Kenny read other children's books, and Annabel tried to be happy with the mama she already had. After school, when the weather was good, she would take the only book she owned down to the sitting tree, wiggle her butt into the growing crack at its base, and read to the tree. She tried to make it sound like Mrs. Kenny had, did a happy voice and a sad voice, and what she was pretty sure were engine noises. The tree didn't complain anyway. Its thin branches swayed in the breeze, the creek babbled gently, and the plucky trade engine made it over the hill. When she was 7, her mama taught her to sew. It was the first time that Annabel had been allowed to touch a sewing needle, on account of how sharp they were and how bad it was to get into Mama's things, so she was very careful. "You can't expect me to keep mending your clothes just because you don't want to be a proper lady," her mama had said. "No, take it out and do it again. It has to be straight or people will think I haven't taught you properly." She shook her head, and Annabel slowly plucked her almost straight stitches back out again. "It's a shame what you do to your clothes," her mama said, referring to the rip she'd gotten this afternoon from where Mabel and Meredith had pushed her into a fence on the walk home from school. "Weirdo," Mabel had said, and "cheap trash," Meredith had said. Annabel said nothing. She did get a lot of practice at sewing that fall, on account of 2nd grade being the year that girls decided who was worth knowing and who wasn't, and Annabel was on the side of not worth knowing, according to the rest of the girls at her school. She sat at the base of her tree, which was wider and taller by then, and had gotten enough leaves to actually notice when they fell. She could see the leaves piling up when she looked at it out of her window, after her mama decided it was too cold to be playing outside any more that year. Storms and snow would be coming soon enough. "Daddy, won't the tree get cold?" Annabel asked. Her father, who had been sitting in his chair, the orange one at the edge of the living room that she wasn't allowed to play on, for all the hours it had been since dinner time, looked up from his paper. It seemed to take a moment for him to remember who she was, and she waited quietly while it came to him. "Oh, Annabel," he said, "what was it you were saying?" "I was wondering if the tree could get cold the way we do since it's coming on winter now." She tried not to fidget, though her bare feet were cold on the hardwood floor, so she didn't distract him from an answer. He replied slowly. "Maybe it does. I'm not really sure." He nodded at her then and went back to his reading. That night, Annabel snuck out and gathered up as many leaves as she could and ran back into the house. 3 days later, her mama yelled for her. "Annabel, you get down here right this minute," her mama had said. And Annabel hurried down the stairs, still half dressed from getting ready for school. "Yes, Mama?" she asked. "You want to tell me why that tree out there has a whole net of leaves all sewn onto it?" her mama asked. Annabel didn't really want to tell her, but there was no getting out of it. "Daddy said the tree might get cold," she replied, hoping her daddy would in fact remember that he had said something like that. "I made a string of all the leaves and wrapped up the tree in it like we do with cranberries at Christmas." She smiled at that, pretty proud of herself for remembering something her mama actually liked making. The older woman frowned and Annabel's smile faded away. From then on, the tree would have to take the risk of freezing through the winter, since the cost of thread was too much for her mama to allow on anything other than sewing up tears and missing buttons and hemming pants, which always needs to be let out long enough the way that child, always Annabel, kept growing. Mama had cracked a wooden spoon using it too many times on Annabelle's butt over that, and the time that she tried a too small sweater around its base when the snow started to fall, and the time when she was 9 and saved up her babysitting money to buy the tree its own scarf, one Mama couldn't get mad about. She did anyway, but at last Annabelle started to not care. When she was 12, Annabelle's mom was pregnant again. She'd known something was wrong from the way her mama had been crying for a few months, in between getting the flu a whole bunch of times, and Daddy took more shifts at the plant and in between sat down by the creek bed, not even pretending to fish. The cool water flowing over his submerged six-pack kept the bottles cold, and it was hard to hear Mama yelling from all the way up at the house. Annabelle didn't mind her daddy sharing her hideaway spot, nestled into the curve of the tree, and he didn't mind her being there either, mostly since he didn't notice. She read her books, borrowed from the middle school library, and he drank his beer, and the tree's thick branches moved a little in the breeze. "Your hair's turning green," Jared Miller had told her at recess one day in October. "Is that for Halloween?" "It is not," she said back and walked away from him. But she went straight to the girls' bathroom, ignoring the heavy sighs and pouty faces of the girls putting on their makeup at the far end of the row of mirrors. Annabelle pulled at strands of her normally light brown hair and held them up to the light. It wasn't much, but Jared was right. Mixed in with all the brown were bits of green. "You're a freak, you know that," one of the girls said. "Yes, I know," Annabelle replied, and left. By November, the green hair, a pale green like washed river rocks or clover in the sunlight, had grown in streaks big enough to be noticed, and Annabelle had to get cleverer about how she did her hair in the mornings. Her parents, busy with their own lives and the soon-to-be-born baby, would never notice, but a teacher might, and that would end with a note home, and that couldn't be ignored. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tying her hair into braids, when rain began to fall heavily on the window. It seemed to come straight at the house instead of falling from the sky, and the sunlight disappeared. Downstairs, she could hear her mother yelling again. Another minute satisfied her that no one would notice her grass-colored hair today. The rain began to pound like a stranger knocking on a neighbor's door, and heavy thumps, water mixing solidly with the rising wind. Annabelle's father began to yell too. Opening the bathroom door, she could hear metal cans hitting the kitchen floor and the muffled voice of a radio announcer saying something she couldn't make out. Her heart beating faster, Annabelle ran toward the stairs. Outside, a dark, rumbling noise grew louder. She got to the kitchen just as her parents, her father with a bag over one shoulder and a flashlight in his hand, made their way out the back door. She followed them, watching as they hurried out of the house, into the darkness. On the back porch, Annabelle could see the storm as it rushed toward them, spread out to fill the whole sky. The sun was gone. The day was gone. Silence was gone. Her parents, too, were gone. She turned in time to see her father's arm pull shut the storm cellar door. The wind rose, pulling at her clothes, her hair, undoing her braids. She threw up her arm to cover her face as the shingles, always loose, started to pull away from the roof. Grass and small branches pulled from the woods beyond the creek began to hit her, raining against the house. "It's a tornado," she said. The sound pulled from her throat so that she couldn't hear her own words, but she felt her lips moving when she said them. Tornado. The wooden door to the cellar flapped against the concrete, a heavy sound. Smack, smack. The wood groaned as the wind tore through it, straight toward the house. She looked out and saw the black sky, the empty year, and the faint outline of her tree. Annabelle ran. Unable to see, hands shielding her face, she watched her feet cross familiar terrain until she felt the strong, smooth bark of the tree. She wrapped her arm around it, barely able to grasp her own hands on the other side. The monster roared. "Tree," she said, the shape of the word on her voiceless lips. Her hair, brown and green, a leaf green, she suddenly decided, floated out in all directions as the wind rushed toward them. "Annabelle," the tree said, without a mouth, without a sound, and the tornado struck. Sorry, I'm one of those weird readers. That story always makes me cry. So, I think that is... Oh, I have more time. Apparently.
Questions?
Hi.
Hi,
Question?
will you take questions?
Yes, sure. I'll take questions.
There's a moment where it of the Giving Tree, and I wondered if you were doing that intentionally or not.
I have actually never read that story.
Oh, interesting.
So, and you're the first person to ask me that, so now I feel like I need to go read that story. I've heard of it, of course. It's Shel Silverstein, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of funny. I mostly didn't read a lot of children's books when I was little, and when I finally discovered the library in middle school, I found out they had a horror section. So I mostly read that, and I've gone back ever since I have a child now. I've been reading him all these stories that I hadn't read when I was younger. And a couple that I do remember, like, I had Harold and the Purple Crayon when I was little, so I read that to him a lot. I know that story. All right, I'll have to look at that. Any other questions?
I actually didn't catch the title of the story.
The story was called Annabel Tree.
Annabel Tree.
Right, and it was, I'll tell you where it was published before, just one second. So it was originally published in something called Southern Fried Weirdness Reconstruction in 2011, and I wrote it specifically for that anthology, which was collecting money for the Red Cross after a tornado in 2011. So, and unfortunately there are so many tornadoes, it wasn't really for one specifically, but, so yeah, that was that story.
So
You have so many questions, Mary.
It's okay. In your introduction, you also talk about how you actually did love trees and had like a relationship with a tree. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more, and also how your relationship with trees now.
I've always spent a lot of that. This story is slightly more autobiographical than most of my other ones. I have always spent a lot of time outdoors, and I grew up in California, so I didn't grow up with tornadoes, but I did grow up with a backyard that had one tree in it, and it was a very big tree, and from the time that I could climb into it, I spent most of my days hanging out in the backyard and sitting up in the tree, and I was that kid. I had headphones, and I would listen to my music, and I would sit in the tree for hours at a time, and that was mostly what I did with my day. But you spend all that time alone, and then you end up being a writer. I think that's sort of a thing that happens to most of us. You spend too much time telling your own stories in your head, and then you have to put them down. So, we have about 15 minutes left, so I should probably read something else. 1 second. What do I have that's short? Oh, everything I have is short. That works really well. Trying to, okay. I know, right. Trying to go with something that's a slightly different tone. This story is called Call Center Blues. It was published in Daily Science Fiction a couple years back. Thank you for calling Facts Unlimited. My name is Claire. How can I help you? My household unit isn't working, a man's voice said gruffly. I keep giving it commands, but they don't work. Okay, sir, I'm happy to help you with that. Can I get your account number? He rattled off a string of numbers, which I entered into my terminal. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Patty taking another call, her head moving slowly in time with her dialogue. As long as she was still on that call, she wouldn't be able to take the next one. No such luxuries for me, as I was currently IMing an encryption key to a factory manager in Bangalore, and simultaneously replying to an email about the new style and color options for the upcoming year. Meanwhile, my client's account opened up in front of me. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Holden. I just need to verify a little information before we can proceed. Are you still living at apartment 24C, Burr Building, City Level 12? Yes, he sighed. Nothing's changed. Your machine just doesn't work. I am sorry to hear that, sir, and we are going to get her fixed for you. Now you have a May model delivered to you 78 days ago. She's still under warranty, so there will be no charge for the service call. I cringed as I said that. Knowing they didn't have to pay by the minute made some clients extra chatty, and I still had to troubleshoot that software download for a couple of dozen heavy labor models in India. What kind of issues are you having with her? She doesn't do anything. The unit doesn't turn on? Oh, no, she's on. She's sitting on the sofa right now staring at me. Have you tried turning her off and on again? Yes, I've done that. Doesn't help. She looks all bright and happy, then she sees me, stops smiling, and sits down on the couch. I scanned the contents of John Holden's file. looking for attachments or upgrades that might conflict with the base programming. Can I ask what kind of tasks you're asking her to perform? Nothing weird, he insisted, though of course they all did. Normal stuff, cooking, cleaning. This morning I told her to make bacon and she crossed her arms. Scanning his original order, I spotted it. Sir, were you aware that you ordered the optional care and compassion package? That's the niceness thing, right? Guy said it would make her sweet. I want sweet, but refusing to cook my bacon is not sweet, he yelled. Head turned away from the receiver. He wasn't yelling at me. Sir, please calm down. I'm certain we can get this taken care of. Patty waved at me and I looked down to see another line blinking. I shook my head and the older woman nodded in response. She pushed a few buttons and the light disappeared with my phone, leaving me with just Mr. Cranky Pants to deal with for the moment. Now, Mr. Holden, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but that model makes your unit more receptive to your needs, but it also makes her more sensitive to any anger or negativity on your part. When you phrase your requests, are you putting them in the form of a question? Are you saying please? What? Why would I have to ask? She's a damn robot. I sighed as quietly as possible. The client was in his early 80s and clearly prejudiced. Sir, I understand your frustration, and of course the May unit is designed to fulfill all your culinary and cleaning needs. She wants to help you, sir. It's in her programming. It's just that over time, the unit can balk at orders. She needs a bit of a gentle touch is all. Too much work, he grumbled. Can I reboot her, start from scratch? Well, yes, sir, of course you can, but doing so will only solve the problem temporarily. As she develops her personality and adapts to your needs, you may run into this problem again. Don't care. Easier than not getting my breakfast. I forced a smile back onto my face. Always answer with a smile, our training taught us. Advised Holden to turn his unit off and sent the reboot order wirelessly. Soon enough, the May unit was back to her original, helpful bacon cooking self. Checking the clock, I logged the call and switched my terminal off. India would have to wait until tomorrow. Bad call, Patty asked. Another jerk who doesn't care this robot has, actual feelings. Patty nodded and replied, and rolling my eyes, I grabbed a screwdriver from my desk drawer. Walking over to my coworker, I said, Patty, can I please fix that loose lever? Your head bobbing is driving me nuts. Oh, yes, please, Patty replied happily, her wrinkled face joyful. I was starting to get dizzy. I understand, I said, gently opening the other woman's neck to reveal a spring and lever system slightly out of whack. It happens to me all the time. Okay, I think that is close enough. We're 11:21. Okay, so if there are any other questions or comments, well, thank you very much for coming to my reading. And do any of you not have a copy of my collection? Because I have extras.